How you doing? I got the idea of doing this lesson while doing a one-on-one training with Jerry, a member of mine. He's been playing for 20 years, but he actually went back and took my novice course, which is for beginners. And listen to what he said.
Believe it or not, I actually finished the novice section,
Oh yeah,
which
yeah, you're
was
way
so
past novice.
helpful. Well, let me tell you, I got something out of that big time.
Oh wow.
So I was like, I am so glad I went through there. And
Yeah,
so,
the intervals, right?
yeah, the intervals woke me up. I'm like, this is too cool.
So I got to thinking, I said to myself, it's not always been clear what you should be doing if you want to play by ear. So I have three fundamental things that you have to do if you're starting to play by ear, or if you already play by ear and you're wanting to know, am I missing something? And I want to outline three things that you have to have in order to be a complete musician. And what will happen if you neglect any one of these three things. So I'm representing this relationship of the three things that you need by a triangle, one of the most stable shapes that we have. And you need to have a good ear. You need to understand the fundamental rules, and you need to understand your chords and scales. This perfect triangle would be basically training the ear, the hands, and the mind. Let's start with the ear. So ear training means you're able to identify intervals within music. A lot of people confuse this with perfect pitch. But if I have a chord here, well, for at the very beginning, it's just two notes. So can you tell what kind of interval that is? And you should be able to tell that that's a perfect fifth. And this, you should be able to tell that it's a tritone. This, you should be able to tell it's a minor seventh. But this, I should be able to hear the intervals within this chord. And a lot of people can't do that. It's not perfect pitch. Interval is distance, right? If I am to represent how close I am to someone, I could say, you know what, they're 5 feet away. And if they get closer, I can say, oh, they are maybe 7 inches away from me. But with piano, how far are two notes, right? What do I use to determine how far two notes are? And it's an interval. An interval will tell me. And so that's what the ear is hearing. It's not necessarily hearing that this is an E flat. It's hearing that the distance between E flat and this note is a major 6, and that's going to help me learn songs. Now, what happens if you neglect to train your ear? You start learning chords, you start learning theory, but you don't really train your ear. What will happen is that you won't be able to learn new songs easily. You'll hit a wall quickly with the type of songs you can learn because you won't be able to pick them up by ear. So you have to run to YouTube, or you'll have to get sheet music, or you have to get something in order to figure out the songs because your ear isn't developed. So that's what happens if you neglect to get the proper ear training that you need. So the next thing I call are chords, or scales and chords, and it's actually training the hands, right? But the way we start is we start off with the scales, right? And then we move to chords. So you should start by scale. A lot of people skip scales; they try to move straight to chords. But we should start by scales. We have 12 unique notes in the piano. And all of these 12 have a set of 7 notes, and these 7 notes are called a scale, represented by, some of you may have heard it, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And I could literally press down any note and go a whole note, half note, whole note, whole, and half again. And I can find the major scale in that key. And it needs to be memorized. That whole, half is a great rule to find out what the notes are, but it doesn't stop there. It has to be internalized and memorized in order for it to benefit you in any way. And then the chords will come from the scales. Now, what happens if somebody neglects their scales? Well, generally they will struggle to play in certain keys. The great Oscar Peterson, it said that he practiced scales. And this is when people considered him one of the greatest musicians in the world, but he would be practicing the scales for hours a day. I don't think you ever outgrow practicing your scales. And the neat thing about scales is you can start with the major scale, but once you master that, you can move to the melodic minor, then you can do the harmonic minor, then you can do pentatonic scale, and then you can do an altered scale. There's so many different scales. And the cool thing about it is that a lot of chords simply come from the scales. And the worst thing that could happen is you'll come onto one of my videos where I'm playing a song and I'm playing a song in D, and you'll put a comment and you'll say, Sean, I need you to play the song in C. But it's because you didn't know your scales. So if you don't know your scales, you won't be able to play in that key. And then once you learn scales, we learn what's called the diatonic triads. And what that means is each of these notes has a corresponding chord that goes along with it. And so you need to learn all your diatonic triads as well. It can take from a couple of months to maybe a year, depending on your schedule. But this is something that I suggest that all musicians do. And actually on my website, I actually have a course dedicated to doing nothing but just, let's learn our scales. Here's the fingering. All right, now let's learn our triads. Now let's use these triads in songs, because the power of triads cannot be underestimated. Go back and look at my last video. The last couple of videos, like we talk about triads. So there's so much you can do if you master triads. And this way you will not feel like you hit a wall, or you won't feel stuck. Now let's discuss this part of the triangle. You know, when I was younger, they used to hate it when everybody would be watching a big football game, and then the sportscaster would say something, and I'd be like, what's a pass interference mean? What just happened? Like, and I'm asking so many questions, right? I didn't understand the rules at all. I didn't understand anything this guy was saying. So I'm like, so they kicked me out, right? So I try to play with my cousins in basketball. And I got the basketball, and I kept the basketball, and I'm running with the ball, right? I'm not dribbling, I'm just running. And they're like, dude, what are you doing? You're traveling. I didn't understand the rules. And so what happens when you don't understand the rules? No matter how much talent you have, it's hard to master the subject. It's hard to master, and every single subject that you can take has a set of rules that if you can understand those rules, that it makes things so much easier. It allows you to master that particular subject. And music is no different. Learning how the notes work together. It means learning when you should use certain chords. It means learning what a dominant chord is, learning what a diminished chord is, and when to use it. And each genre uses their chords a little bit differently, right? So what you're doing is you're learning the rules of the genre that you want to play. At this channel, we primarily study gospel. I would say most of it is gospel. We kind of dabble into some jazz every once in a while, and maybe do some classical, but it's mostly gospel. And understanding the rules of gospel, or whatever subject you're trying to do, what happens if somebody neglects to get a proper understanding of how music works? Well, I'm going to say a statement. This is my opinion, but I believe that natural talent and ability plus effort is actually not enough. You can take someone who's extremely talented, and they can practice, but there's still a limit to what they can do because they're missing that third thing. So nobody could tell me that Mike Tyson, he may have been a natural fighter, he may have been really gifted, and he may have practiced all day, every day. But that doesn't mean that you can just throw him into a professional boxing ring, right? A teacher can come along, they can explain the rules of the game, they can take him aside, they can show him any bad technique that he may not have known by just picking things up on his own, right? So this is the same with music, is that you could be a really great musician, you could have learned everything yourself, but you're gonna hit a wall. And the thing that I like to say about the rules, a lot of people think that, rules will confine you. But no, the rules will free you. And that reminds me of myself, because I didn't start learning the rules of music until I actually started this channel. And it was when I was starting this channel that I would do research, and I would start transcribing, and I would notice patterns, and I would kind of jot down the things that I would notice. And this freed me, and actually I feel like I've done more growing in the last couple of years that I've done my channel than I've done in several decades, just by understanding the rules. So here's what I want to do is, let's see what happens though if we develop two things and neglect one of those. What happens if you develop your hands, Okay, so you can play very well, you know all your scales, you know your chords and everything, and you know your fundamentals, but you don't develop your ear. What do you think will happen? Well, let me know in the comments what happens. What happens is that that person has a hard time getting new chords. Now, if you're an ear musician but don't read music, now you're kind of stuck, because how do you learn new chords? You're going to have to rely on someone else to tell you what these chords are. And so that's a handicap. So let's do ear and hands. Okay, so that means you develop your ear. You can also develop your hands to be able to play different chords. And so you know what chords to play when. But you don't have the fundamentals. Well, you're going to hit a wall because you won't have an understanding of what you're doing, right? And so you should always seek to try to understand what you are playing. And that understanding can come from channels like mine and other amazing channels that explain gospel musicians. This is a gospel musician channel. There's so many great gospel music channels that will help you to get an understanding. You want to understand what you're doing, and so you will hit a wall if you do not understand what you're doing. So what happens if you have the fundamentals, so you understand the rules of the game, you understand what's going on, and you've trained your ear well, but you just haven't really been able to practice as much with your hands to not just understand the scales, but what I mean by hands is understanding where to use certain chords and emotionally where you want to use certain chords. Well, what will happen is your playing will sound mechanical. It will sound textbook. And we don't want that. We want our playing to affect people. You know, theory gives me an understanding of the music, but it won't let me play a song with emotions and feeling. And so in order for me to play in a way where people can feel what I'm playing, I have to develop my hands. And developing the hands means I'm practicing what I like. I'm using my ear to determine what chord I like, right? So I don't use the rules for that. I use my ear for that. And my ear will tell me, oh, I like this chord here. I love how that sounds. And so that's why I say we need all three of these things in order to be a complete musician. Or if you want to focus on one of these specific things more, you wish you could focus on one of these more, let me know in the comments. For me, it was definitely fundamentals. It was definitely fundamentals, and was also, and then I think second for me would have been my hands. I think I would have focused on that more. For me, I focused on ear a lot. Okay, and so now the other parts are now just coming up. But we all, you know, everybody has gaps somewhere. Obviously, I have a unique way that I address these three things on my own website, so you can check the link for that. But it's important for all musicians to be well-rounded, to have all of these things. And so I'm challenging you guys to make sure that you don't have any of these things missing, that everybody can develop these and become the musician that they really want to be. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you guys later.